Yeah, I'm hugely sorry because of maybe the break in transmission. As we normally see, Africa is problematic and it's just a matter of network. I got a breakdown in our transmission, so I have to maybe reorganize my network and try to change the system over. Um, Welcome to Focus on Liberia. I am the West African correspondent, Edward Amara. Welcome to the news update on breaking news of African current affairs. Focus on Africa on Liberia uses this particular opportunity to bring you latest development on the continent, things that actually affect the continent, breaking news. We, as I normally say, Africa is a very interesting continent. We have the opportunity to interface with different type of maybe news. Some also of those news can be politically striking. Some of them can be economically eye-catching, and some can actually have to dealing with our human capital. Africa is actually blessed with a very huge young population. But unfortunately, because of certain activities that happens on the continent, we have not been able maybe to carefully make effective and efficient use of our young population that we have. We have had systems that are actually affecting on the way we handle certain affairs. Not that Africa is just as problematic as we think to be, or maybe even those news that we tend to hear sometimes are not definitely not favorable. And when you watch at the activities that happens on the continent from the length and breadth of Africa, you will understand that we are not making progress as expected. Maybe since if you can watch like the struggle for our independence in Africa since the early 1950s up to now, only few countries have been able to establish tangible pieces of success, within successes. However, I normally tell people again, we choose to maybe embrace uh, liberal democracy into Africa too earlier than expected. When those of our political thinkers did not even try to first understand that even that liberal democracy was part and parcel of African culture. If you watch as Europe and the Americas, they never embraced liberal democracy as early as possible. They underwent different type of treacherous regime, but those regimes helped to unite them together, create a spirit of unity. And when liberal democracy finally came, there was that fundamental mentality and a very strong foundation where they started to build it. Unfortunately, when Africa came, we came with a divisive mentality. You know, democracy also is a diversity, maybe in unity in diversity. But the manner in which ours is being interpreted has created huge trouble than whatsoever thing. I think democracy is more or less an imposition on the African culture. Because when you watch at the pre-colonial system into Africa, you will accept the fact that Africa was actually having a type of governance system, but it was not based on democratic principles. Even if you watch out in ancient Greece, they actually in Athens they supported democracy. This is where you have philosophers. If you watch out in Sparta they have different type of thinkers. Where you have people who believe in aggression military. Maybe because ancient Greece they were so many, to decided to live in terms of democracy. But in Sparta, since they thought and feel that they were just few number, they build military regime. All of those things were there. So let's assume that within those particular time, if Sparta had decided to adopt the mentality of ancient Greece, Sparta wouldn't have been the way it was. Of course, Greece have its own political ramification, things that is supported. We have seen the like of Plato, Aristotle, and others, which help to shape our African mentality or the world at large. Maybe when you watch all of those philosophers, you can think other way. But I think we need to start philosophizing on the African mentality and accepting the fact that most of what we have done have carefully degenerated into trouble. which when you watch at the length and breadth of Africa, we are full of commotion, full of problematic country. Egypt cannot be arguably say that it is absolutely peaceful. You watch at Tunisia, you have Kayside. Even in Egypt, you look at Fattah Sisi, who want to install himself in power after the killing. I can even call it the killing of Musi, the Muslim Brotherhood leader who was democratically elected after the fall of Hosni Mubarak, who ruled the country for over 20 years with an iron fist. We are seeing like Algeria, even after the death of Abdulaziz Bouteflika, Algeria has not been able to stabilize itself. Of course, in Tunisia is the longest uninterrupted Arab democracy since after the Arab uprising in 2010 that was actually, or 2011 that was jabbed by the Obama mentality. Then you watch at places like Morocco, they are too much suppressing people. And very close to places like Spain, they have their own mentality. Even when you watch like Mauritania, of course, Mauritania is based into West Africa, but they have they are Arab by race, and they have people living in the Western Sahara, which they have definitely refused to make them full citizens of Morocco, nor to grant them independence. And since then, they have been finding it very difficult on how to even become part and parcel of ECOWAS or to be fully integrated into the AU system. Look at Eritrea. Eritrea is a very good country, so good in wickedness. You see people like Isaiah Epikwiti, who has been in power since it gained independence in the early 90s, fought a very bitter war with Ethiopia, and they have formed an alliance to definitely ensure that they suppress the people in the Amara, Tigray, and other regions. And you watch at places like Tanzania after the fall of John Magufuli, but Tanzania have been so strong in 1 or 2 way under Samini Suluku. But I thought that I was thinking that John Magufuli was one of the best leaders on the continent. He was definitely carefully killed because of 1 or 2 things. Look at Denis Iguisu, who live in Republic of Congo. Over 38 years now he has been in leadership, and he does not even have the intention to leave. You watch at Equatorial Guinea, where you have Obiandere in power. He does not even have the mentality. Theodore Obiandere does not have the mentality to definitely leave. Since 1978, that dude has been into power, and even made his son to be the vice president. You watch at in Cameroon since 1982, Paul Biya has been in power. So arguably the man could be like 100 years. Now they are saying he's 90. He's not strong enough. Maybe even if he does attend parliament, what will he go to tell? Nothing. Of course, we can even see, yes, of course, Paul Kagame tried hard to build democracy, maybe in Rwanda after the genocide in 1994. But since then, he has been into power and he has extended his leadership. He even have the opportunity to run as far as 2037 into office, and he's actually encouraging women maybe to participate into the democratic reconstruction of Rwanda. But if you deconstruct the system or interpret the system carefully, we understand that the guy is a benevolent dictator who does not encourage political rivalry, and his mentality has been very suited with the American and British mentality. And now he has even created a situation where he will have what they call an asylum, creating an asylum place into Rwanda, we are those who are escaping the suppression, political or economic refugees in the continent of political asylum seekers in Europe to be sent back into Rwanda. And people are even claiming that the area is not ideal. He could use that his mentality to suppress them. If you keep down into East Africa, Somalia is definitely not peaceful. Fighting Al-Shabaab, of course. Paul Biya, Yoweri Museveni in Uganda has been there since 1986 in power. Joseph Kony, nobody knows where he is today, but still people are thinking that now UDM is fighting against what making the form of terrorism group into Uganda. Maybe Museveni should be in Kampala, but not that strong. Bobby Wine is under serious oppression. You come down into places like Somalia, Al-Shabaab have been on the end of affairs. But Kenya is not too peaceful. Mombasa on several occasions have been attacked. William Ruto and Raila Odinga, that political failure, does not even want to quit power because they just believe in that cookie mentality and fighting political rivalry, nepotism, tribalism is definitely, and Kenya is full of religious mentality. We have seen how maybe that Good News International Church has succeeded in killing a lot of people, all out of frustration. If you watch at Africa, you come down into West Africa, Mali is not peaceful, coup d'etat upon coup d'etat, Guinea very close to all has its own trouble, coup d'etat, Burkina Faso is another. The Burkina Faso means the land of the honest men. Since the fall of Blaise Compaoré in 2012, now we are seeing others. Kabore went, we saw Traoré and others are still leading the country. You see, Benin is not too peaceful, although it is one of the few stable democracy into the sub-Saharan Africa, because it has not experienced a lot of regime change. But Niger also is still suffering. Cameroon in the Bakassi Peninsula with Nigeria, and they are also having a kind of war among the English-speaking Cameroons and French-speaking Cameroonians. Of course, Bamenda is being used under those grounds. Unfortunately, Paul Biya is too old not to even know what is definitely going on. Of course, in Nigeria, Boko Haram, IPOB, kidnapping, banditry are definitely the order of the day. If I can sit down there and maybe give you analysis on what happened on the continent, the situation is actually confusing, and you will understand that even our fragile democracy. Look at Liberia and Sierra Leone. After the 10-year civil war, we have not been able maybe to reorganize ourselves, construct our narrative have not been perfectly changed. We have not been able to have maybe strong political regime that can reorganize, and maybe we make a careful explication into what actually caused the war. Because most of what happened in this part of the continent, we understand that some people do not even know why the war was fought. So I think we need to carefully change things. So Africa is Africa. Maybe we need to think and see how we can deconstruct things that happen and reshape our political thinking. Let's start our programming proper. Welcome to Focus on Liberia once more. Feel free to comment and join the program wheresoever you are. We have basically 5 important news this evening. One is Sierra Leone BO wins re-election with 56% of the total valid vote cast against its opponent 41%. Then South Africa cancellation of Zimbabwe permit is unlawful according to the country's Supreme Court. Then African nation must decide to either stick with the Wagner or stick with Russia. The Eritrea babies in Ethiopia birth certificate in limbo. The Nigeria Northeast one step away from famine. Let's start from Sierra Leone. An elections were conducted in Sierra Leone on the 24th of June 2023 on Saturday, in which Sierra Leoneans went to the poll to elect a new president, members of parliament, mayors, and local council or local councillors at the background of economic crisis, unemployment, and inflation. Samora 72, leader of the APC party in opposition against BU-led APC, who is 59. In the context of the election, the opposition bitterly complained prior to the campaign, during the campaigns, and even during elections of foul play. However, the elections were largely peaceful, and it was widely satisfied by international observers. They mentioned that there were certain shortcomings or lack of transparency into the election in one or two ways, but we are not enough to cancel or invalidate the results. In the outcome of the result, SLPP BO won 56% against Samura or Kamara APC, who had 41% of the total valid vote cast, while other candidate had 3%. BO won the election with a landslide victory first round, which avoided the second round system. And Sierra Leone used this trip around what they call proportional representation for the block voting for the election of member of parliament and local councillors. We are a political party. We submit 20 members of parliament, and a member of parliament can be recruited to parliament or can be recruited for that particular constituency with 11.9% of the total valid vote cast. We have not known how many members of parliament are elected on the APC ticket, nor the SLPP ticket or other political parties like the NGC, that is National Grand Coalition, C4C, that is Coalition for Change, PMDC, People's Movement for Democratic Change, and other political parties. The election result for the presidential was announced, and we do not have a second round. The proportional representation for the local councils and House of Representatives also have the opportunity not to or have the advantage for by-elections not to be conducted, because since they are elected on a scale of preference or other importance, should somebody die or being given a very new position, the person who came second on the list, on the proportional representation list, can easily be recruited to parliament on those previous things. However, the only disadvantage into the system against is like people whom certain constituencies think that they should go and represent them in parliament cannot necessarily elect them, because the political party will have the opportunity to award 20 different people symbols. And when they are now presenting the list, it is now the party that decide who they prefer to occupy the first position, second position, third position, as the case may be. So if a particular district has like 20 constituencies, which means 20 members of parliament of that particular district are going to be recruited to parliament. So maybe a particular constituency may think that it is Joe Kefla that should occupy one, but on the political party submission of list, they may prefer another person. And the system also provide for 30% of representative of females. It means if a constituency have like 10 parliamentarians, at least 3 of the parliamentarians should be females. But when we saw the presentation of the list, only few people are actually part and parcel of those candidates being selected by certain political parties. Maybe it could be because of qualification, or maybe because of lack of financial power to actually pay for a candidacy. Then in this system, a young man who may not have money can easily be elected to parliament based on what independent candidate. However, if you won a particular constituency and you went to parliament, the law says you must join a political party to have a standardized, maybe an area where you can advocate. So basically, Sierra Leoneans, we conducted our election. It was free and fair, peaceful, and BO is now the president-elect. We are currently awaiting the mayoral results, and also member of parliament, and also ward. And we are hoping that this particular new regime will take the country from one standard to another. Largely, BO did perfectly well. There is increment in terms of development in the country. We have stable electricity. We have free education. We have a good road network. Then basically agricultural system have been vitality have been injected into the agricultural system. Maybe there were few incidences like inflation, whatsoever thing, but most of those things, when you watch at it logically, can be associated with what is happening globally. COVID-19, inflation is all over. Then at the same time, global warming and one or two things. And we should understand that Africa, whatsoever thing that happens, like the war in Ukraine, it has a ramification on what the continent does. Okay, let's jump to South Africa. In South Africa, cancellation of Zimbabwe resident permit, deemed illegal. South Africa, before this time, since 2015, have actually permitted Zimbabweans to actually be living into South Africa without having resident permit. That will allow them to seek for job and get employment. However, some times ago, they decided to cancel the ministry, decided to cancel immigration, actually decided to cancel their free resident permit. The issue was taken to court, and that would have actually caused 157 Zimbabweans to go out of job, and to be illegally now living in Zimbabwe instead in South Africa instead of going out of job, and they would have been coerced, if not forced, to get back to Zimbabwe, so they do not have a legal resident permit. However, the court system have to overturn the particular case and ask them to still continue the free resident permit. Some of them are political refugees, while others actually are economic refugees. And the South Africa had wanted a northern neighbor citizens' resident permit to be cancelled. However, the court system interjected into the particular case, and its interpretation of the law have been widely hailed, and everybody is absolutely happy because it intervened on behalf of the Zimbabweans, and we all know what the government of Amara Mnangagwa, popularly known as the crocodile, is actually doing into Zimbabwe. And they also said Zimbabwe is also set to go into a general and presidential election, the parliamentary and presidential elections in August. 11 parties have been satisfied to run, but everybody is widely expecting the ruling party to win the election, led by Amara Mnangagwa, known as the crocodile. Grace Mugabe, who is a Zimbabwean but married to Robert Gabriel Mugabe, is also seen as somebody who is trying maybe to inject herself into supporting certain political parties, and she's not actually sympathizing or an apologist now with the ruling ZANU-PF party, because she claims that she was treated unfairly. Okay, let's come to Russia mentality and the Wagner. The Wagner is a type of company into Russia, with largely involved into military and diamond or mineral mining on the continent. Our Kim Jong-il, the leader of the Wagner group, fell out with Vladimir Putin, and he made an attempt maybe to march to Moscow to see how he can successfully overthrow Putin. But after negotiation, I think Putin was forced to ensure that they avoid the war, and now the fellow found himself in Belarus, and he is now with Lukashenko. Lukashenko is actually the leader of Belarus, and we all know how Russia forcefully ensured that Lukashenko remained the leader of Belarus after he lost the election some part in 2016, but with a lot of demonstration whatsoever thing, he was actually accepted as the president-elect, and he's a pro-Russian guy. I don't know how successful with Pidginkin actually live in Belarus when the regime into Belarus is actually a pro-Russian guy, or somebody who sympathizes with the Putin mentality, and he was deemed as a rebel. And now the Wagner group that there are groups or military that are on the continent now have now found they are now finding themselves, especially the African nations now, either to support the Wagner, it means they are going to go against Russia, or support the Russians and forget about them. But those guys are on the continent for military and economic purposes, and they may be having some amount of support from Russia, as Putin, defense minister, say the revolutionary regime has invested huge amount of money into the Wagner military that are now operating in places like CR, the Central African Republic, in northern Sudan, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and other few countries. So African nations have now found themselves not knowing where to support and where should their life support go. So it's a very dynamic thing, and they should know what to do and what not to do. And Russia maybe may tend to turn it back on African nations that may choose to support the Wagner against itself, or maybe Russia may tend to inherit the Wagner group. And now the man now, the Pichachenko, is now being vilified and is currently in Belarus. Nobody knows what may happen with him in a few months to come. Eritrea babies in Ethiopia, Eritreans babies in Ethiopia birth certificate limbo. By right, most of those Eritreans who are given birth into Ethiopia should be given birth certificate to tell them that they are Ethiopians but born to Eritrean parents. And the returnees and refugees birth certificate registration have halted over 15 months ago. They are not spoken to those guys, and most of those Eritreans who are even outside Ethiopia may want to come and go back with their children or family in their places of origin. Although many of them were given birth into Eritrea, but they do not have the birth certificate to justify or juxtapose their system. So they are now calling up on the Eritrean government to ensure that this thing is being facilitated, and people should not be denying their right to become citizens in the name of birth certificate or other opportunities. So they are heavily calling upon those guys to the government of Ethiopia to ensure that this particular thing is being facilitated. While some refugees who are actually Eritreans who are actually living in Ethiopia fled both economic and political crisis. Some of them are actually political refugees, while others are economic refugees. Finally, Nigeria Northeast, one step away from famine. Boko Haram out of its activities have killed over 40,000 people and displaced over 1 million people. And now the region in the Northeast is on one step away from facing famine, because no normal activity in terms of famine is going on. People have been displaced. They are in IDPs camp or internally displaced people camp, socially abandoned, and most of them have been recruited. And with this Muslim mentality, some people are actually being given their children into early marriages. There are diseases, famine. The area is not ideal, and WHO and others are strictly warning that WHO, including WFP, are strictly warning that the hygiene condition is not actually good, and famine is definitely on the verge. They are calling upon the Nigerian government and Africa, especially the UN, to ensure that these children are being protected and let there be peace into Nigeria. Unfortunately, they have elected a man who is arguably 80. He is 72 on his official birth certificate, but if you watch at him critically, he could be 80, and by the time he leaves office in India's time, he could be 80 years old, and in actual fact, the man could be a centenarian. So nobody knows if whether his situation could end up like the like of Alhaji Omar Yawadua, who were widely accused of being or alleged of being ill health, until he finally died in office. We saw the like of Goodluck Jonathan taking over affairs. So pray and hope that it doesn't happen soon. Thank you very much. It's been me, Amara, focus on Liberia, West African correspondent, coming to you with the latest development on the continent. Join me same place, same time on Friday, where we bring you further news on the continent. Thank you. Good night.